heard God speak to me, and He said, "Don't pray for him." Hey, God, why did you tell me not to pray for that guy? If you read the Bible, God has no box. I go, no way. No way. It's the guy from the convenience store. I think it was CVS. I think it was Walgreens. When I felt this power leave me, he kind of, ooh, his eyes were closed. Our relationship with God and faith itself is based on desire. Give me a new car, give me $1 million. Not want like that. What? Are you serious? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Anthony Leong. Welcome to Anthology. Today, I'm talking with you about a time when God told me not to pray for somebody. Through this story and what happened afterwards, I learned a lot about God's timing as well as how to trust God even when what He tells us to do doesn't make much sense. So, hopefully, this story is a blessing to you today. Without further ado, let's get into it. One day, I was on my lunch break, and at the time of my life that this story took place, I was working in the construction field. I worked in construction and outdoor living and landscaping for about 6, 7 years of my life. And so during that period of time when I was at during lunch, I would either go out to a local restaurant or a convenience store, or most often I would bring my own lunch. So this day, I went to a convenience store to get some lunch. And I walked in, it was like a CVS or a Walgreens, one of the two. I can't quite remember which one. I think it was CVS. I think it was Walgreens. I can't quite remember the details of that part, but uh, I walked in and I was finding my things and I brought them up to the counter. And as I placed my items down, I was noticing the employee who was behind the counter who was going to ring up my items. And I could tell that he was dealing with some severe health issues. It was obvious, at least to me, it was obvious. And so it was custom for me to pray for people while I was out and about. I still do that. But at the time, I was learning how to minister to people. I was learning how to bring healing to people. I was learning how to prophesy. I was learning the ropes, so to speak, of evangelism. And so I had a desire in my heart to pray for this guy. I wanted to see him be healed. So I'm about to, I'm thinking in my mind of what I'm going to say and how I'm going to present this and how I'm going to open up this door, and I'm seeing if there's anyone behind me because I didn't want to hold up the line, but if the moment opened up for me, I was still going to pray for him even if someone was behind me. So I was kind of doing my due diligence, clearing the room, so to speak, of the evangelistic moment. And in the process of that, I heard God speak to me, and He said, "Don't pray for him." And immediately I thought, "Get behind me, Satan." You know? Like, I'd never heard, uh, a clearer sentence to discourage me from ministering to somebody, from praying for somebody. And so I was like, "Well, this is obviously demonic." So I just was like, "No, I'm gonna pray for him." So I continued to think about how I was gonna pray for him, and God said to me, "Don't pray for him." And the second time that He said that to me, I noticed, oh, this is God's voice. Immediately while I was in that moment, the reason that I initially mistook God's voice for, hindrance, demons, or even my own flesh was because in a moment when you're getting ready to minister to somebody, especially when you're out and about, your senses are heightened and your mind is starting to race about what am I going to say and how am I going to present this, and God, what do you have for this person? And so your inner world becomes very active. And so when God speaks, if you're not sensitized to how His voice sounds and what He would say to you in a moment like that, it's easy to blur the lines and confuse who is speaking to you, especially if you're new and you're starting to learn God's voice and everything like that. And so once I recognized, oh, this is God, then I was kinda like, why don't you want me to pray for him?" So I just accepted, "Okay, I'm not gonna pray for him." So I said, "How are you doing, sir?" And, he said he's doing good, and it sounded like his tongue was tied, like he had a tongue tie, and there was all kinds of health issues I could tell he was dealing with. So he rung up my stuff, and I took it out, and I was kind of frustrated. I thought, "Well, why did God tell me not to pray for this guy?" And I was like, "Lord, why didn't you allow me to pray for him?" And at the time I didn't really understand how to inquire of God. I didn't really understand how intimate of a relationship I could have with God, and so I didn't really think to ask, "Hey, God, why why did you tell me not to pray for that guy?" Instead, I kinda wondered, I wonder why God told me not to pray for that guy. So, I go on doing my thing, and, at this time that this moment occurred, it would have been early to midweek, and the reason I know that is because of what I'm about to tell you. So, the story doesn't end here. That would be a terrible story. That'd be a terrible story. So, God tells me not to pray for this guy, and I'm like, "Alright." And so, later on that week, on Sunday, I was at church service, and I was in the congregation of the saints. And at the time, I was on the prayer team for the church congregation that I was a part of. And people would, at the end of service, most of the time it would be at the end of the service, the pastor or the preacher would call for people to come up to receive specific kinds of prayers. And whether it was healing on that day, or whether it was breakthrough in marriage or financial blessing, or, you name it, whatever, or if it was people who had accepted Christ that day, whatever it was, the specific flavor or flair of the call to receive prayer, I would be up there and be ready to be ministering to people. So, this specific Sunday, I came up to the front, and it was a unique day. It was a unique call to prayer because, it wasn't often that our pastors would call people to the front to receive prayers specifically for healings and miracles. Because, when when you're when you're summoning, or when you're calling people to receive that kind of prayer, there needs to be a required level of faith in the room for that to be engaged. You know, Healing and miracles is a special kind of ministry in God. And that kind of ministry requires a level of faith that other kinds of ministry don't require. There are measures of faith, and there are different gifts for different reasons. And so this particular day, the call for prayer was to receive prayer for healing and miracles. And I remember the feeling of the atmosphere that day. It was charged up. There was faith in the room. There was faith for healing in the room. I could feel it. And so I was excited about that. I could tell that the call for prayer to receive healing matched the faith that was in the room. So that excited me. So I was praying, and I was getting ready, and no one was coming up to me. And people were coming up to other people, but no one was coming up to me. And so, I was waiting, and I was waiting, and I was praying, and then I began to pray in tongues silently, quietly, so no one else could hear me, and just starting to intercede and saying, God, whoever it is that you would have to come up and receive prayer from me, begin to tug on them, begin to stir them. Lord, cause faith to rise up in them so that they can step out in faith and come, and their faith would match my faith, and they would receive everything that you have for them today. So I'm praying, I'm waiting, and time's going by, and I'm like, where are they? Where are you? So I'm like calling out to them, where are you? Come up, come up. I'm calling in the spirit, come up, receive your healing, come up, receive your healing. And how that kind of works is, my mouth is closed, but my heart is open, and I'm calling out in the spirit, and calling destiny forward, and calling that one person forward who today's their day. And so all of a sudden, someone starts walking up the aisle towards me. And as he gets closer to me, I go, "No way. No way. It's the guy from the convenience store." Sure enough, as he's approaching me, Who is it that is coming up to receive prayer from me? It's none other than the guy at the convenience store who God told me not to pray for. What? Are you serious? And in my mind, I'm like, God, this is amazing. And I'm putting pieces together and I'm like, oh my gosh, God withheld me from praying for this man in the context of him being at work, so that when he was in a context of charged faith, I could pray for him in that setting so that he could actually receive the thing that was in my heart to pray for him, not only at the congregation of the saints, but also at his place of work. Wow. So he comes up and I say, "Sir, what do you want me to pray for? What do you want?" And I learned this from the ministry of Jesus. Jesus would come up to people who were paralyzed, who were diseased, who were sick. And so he could obviously see their need. But he would also, but besides that, he wouldn't even ask them, "What do you need?" He would say to them, "What do you want?" Or he would say, "Do you want to be healed?" See, faith in God really doesn't depend on what you need. God already knows what you need. He knows what you need before you even ask. That's what the Bible says. But faith is oftentimes attached to desire or want. So Jesus would say, "Do you want this? Do you desire this?" And so our relationship with God and faith itself is based on desire. It's based on want. Not lust, not want like, "Give me a new car, give me $1,000,000." Not want like that, but what do you desire? So, I believe also, in the context of this story, that God allowed this man to not be ministered to out of his need, which is what I saw at the convenience store, but rather God desired for this man to be ministered to in the context of desire or want, which took place in the congregation of the saints. So he said to me, "I have this going on, I have this going on, and I want to be healed." And I said, "Oh boy." I said, "You got it." So I began to pray for him. And I started praying and praying and praying, and all of a sudden I started praying with power, and I could feel virtue, and I could feel the warm fire of God starting moving through my body, and I described the anointing, the inner anointing, feeling like warm milk, just like rushing through you, just blowing through. And so as I laid hands on him, I began to pray for him. I could feel power leaving me and going into him, and my eyes were open, and when I felt this power leave me, he kind of Ugh, he kinda jolted a little bit, shuddered, his body kinda you could see it. I'm just over here shrugging my shoulders, but you could see him get affected by the power of God, and his eyes were closed, and all of a sudden, he reached out to grab my arm because he was falling over. So, as my one hand is on him, I put my other hand around him, and he's grabbing my arm, and I'm praying for him, and I recognize this because, I've been in ministry settings where when people get prayed for, they fall over under we call it being slain in the spirit or falling out under the power of God. But really, it's when the power of God just overwhelms somebody and they're in such a place where they kind of do a trust fall, and it's really initiated by the person. The person's not trying to do it, it just happens. And so he looked up at me at the end of the prayer and he said, "Thank you. Wow." And he basically was like, "Did you?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was the power of God." And basically what he was trying to communicate was, "Did you see that? Did you feel that? Was that real? Was that just in me?" I'm like, "No, that was God just touched you, sir." And so he turned around and walked back in his chair, and that was the only person that I prayed for the entire day. And there's hundreds, over 1,000 probably people in the congregation. And so it was an amazing moment. And I learned, wow, God, it wasn't that you didn't desire for that man to be prayed for, because obviously he did, but timing in God is always such an important ingredient. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, this was a blessing to you. Let me know if it was. Drop a comment. I'd love to hear how the story was a blessing to you. And I want to encourage you that as you're walking with God and as you're praying and all these different things that are within the context of our relationship with God, just know that sometimes God will tell you to do something or tell you not to do something or lead you somewhere that it doesn't seem like God would do that, or doesn't seem like God would say that, or doesn't seem like this would be the way in which God would lead a person's life. But if you read the Bible, and just coming from my experience as well, God has no box. There is no box. There is no ideal way, our ideal lifestyle, or ideal prayer, or ideal communication with God. We have made Christianity in the West, in America, to appear a certain way. But if you read the Bible, God has no box. He really truly has no box. And so you can allow yourself to be free. You can allow yourself to follow God and have liberty in pursuing God. And that's good. And that's okay. So I bless you and I pray that as you walk with the Lord, that God would lead you in paths of righteousness and he would lead you and take you to places that you never thought that you would be, and that you would find God there and your heart would be full. Also, if you enjoy this content and you would like more from me, visit the link in my bio. You'll be taken to my website where you'll find my dream journal, which is called Noctiphany. There, I share dreams I've had and I break them down and I explain how I arrive at their interpretations. Everybody dreams. Most people remember their dreams. Very few people know how to interpret their own dreams, and even fewer people yet know how to interpret the dreams of others. I, through practice and the grace of God and the gifting of God, know how to interpret dreams, not just my own, but also other people's. I've interpreted hundreds of dreams. And so I want to bring you into that process through Noctiphany. So if that's something that you're interested in, visit the link in my bio. Without further ado, I'm Anthony Leong. This is Anthology. And until the next episode, God speed.